Consider This, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
You did anyway.
Hello and welcome back to Consider This. My guest this week is an old friend, and in his latter years, not that you're really old, Don Schinzel.
Yeah. I'm moving up the ladder.
You're moving up there. You've taken on a project that really could have used your management help, and you've turned it into something quite exciting and important. We're talking about the Nebraska Food Bank Network. Of course, you haven't done it alone, but how many years has it been, Nelson?
I'm in my 10th year now. It's my second career.
It's been 10 years, yeah. You decided to go, you were a businessman, you've served on many community boards. I've had the joy of sharing one membership on a board with you. What drew you to this hunger situation, the need for an organized food bank network?
Carol, I have to be very honest that I got into it accidentally, but it couldn't have been accidentally. I got drawn there for a reason. Because I was not that aware of what food banks did before I got into the food bank and working with the Nebraska Food Bank Network. Once there, you can't leave.
Okay, people think of a food bank, they think, and what it is what it is that you bank food that's, some are perishable, but you have some freezing capabilities and refrigerations. Most is non-perishable. You bank it, but I don't know if they really know what happens to it.
Okay, and maybe I need to just go in a little bit
how
food banking came into
because you're the major
existence.
food bank in this area, and how many are there statewide?
There are two food banks, the food bank here in Omaha.
That's the Nebraska Food Bank.
Right, and the Lincoln Food Bank in Lincoln. We have several subsidiaries. But food banking as an organization, national organization, it's only about 31 years old, so it's fairly young. And it came into existence out of a need. And if you think, we get our food both locally, from local, the ConAgras, Campbell Soups, the Baker's Supermarkets, and those kinds of places. Plus we get probably about 45% of our food from national companies, the Kellogg's, the Krafts. And we get that food in full semi loads at a time. That's really what brought food banking into existence. Even you step back and take a look at Omaha. We've got some large agencies, Salvation Army, Red Cross, Together Incorporates, a large pantry. None of those can accept a full semi-load of any
food,
product.
Right.
What was happening before food banks there and the 200 food banks across the country came into being, most of that food, which is overproduction, was going to the landfill. Not because...
Are you serious? They were dumping at the landfill?
Not because the companies wanted to, but because they had no choice. Nobody could take it. And that's really what brought the concept of food banking, using a large warehouse, storing it, and while it's non-perishable, mostly, we do have lots of frozen. We get more and more frozen all the time.
Well, with good folks at ConAgra,
right. We have to have large. We've got a 90,000 cubic foot freezer, but we go out and collect the food, bring it into the warehouse. We serve 271 agencies directly in the Omaha,
Western Iowa
area. And then we have 3 subsidiaries that serve additional agencies in Sioux City, out in Kearney, and in Norfolk. And then this last May, you may have been hearing how terrible the poverty really has become out in the Panhandle, and it's really very true. We opened a branch of our own, a branch in Sydney, to serve those agencies out there. So we bring the food in, both nationally and we pick it up locally. Lots of food drives. Companies in Omaha are very, very good to us.
They've been very good. But but there has to be physically a place, and you think, oh, that's no big deal, but freezer space alone.
Yes.
I mean, you just don't run down the street and find a freezer open that people can store it in. You mentioned what's been happening in western Nebraska. I think many people, and at various times in my life, depending on kind of what information I had available to me or what I chose to listen to, I would have various opinions of people that were hungry, okay? That they could have spent their money better, that they surely no one could, somebody can scrounge up enough money to buy food. But those are kind of half-truths, and it kind of depends on my mood and how much money I have in the bank. But try to paint a picture.
One of the real myths about the people that we serve is that they're all lazy, they don't want to work, they don't work, and they come and get free food. Over 60% of the people, not only that serve by agencies who get their food from the food bank here in Omaha,
or their pantries,
but nationwide, have at least one adult working, and in some cases two. But keep in mind, if they have 3 or 4 children, and they're making...
If you have 1 or 2 children,
no,
almost
but
anyone.
yeah, and they're not making large, $9, $10, $11 an hour, there is no way they can make it. They simply cannot make it, even with
One
two
of the
people
increasing
working.
phenomenons in this country, and I'm not making a political statement, but it's true, that many full-time jobs are being bumped down to part-time jobs. And those part-time jobs, and often now more and more full-time jobs, don't allow health insurance, except at very high premiums. So what we all took for granted was health insurance with that job. That yes, you might have to pay a little for your family, but it was always going to be pretty much a full benny.
Yeah.
That's not happening either.
Not as much as it was, but
So what people that are in these entry-level jobs are trying to get back on track, many of them are finding themselves, maybe their kids can get into the Kids Connection in Nebraska, maybe, if they fall in the right place, but maybe they don't have insurance.
Right.
But I mean, so the decision is food or gas or rent, is now food or gas or rent or health care.
that's true. That's true. And and so often the people, they're really trying, and they are working, even though they're not getting anywhere, but they're working for the health insurance. I saw an advertisement for help a couple weeks ago, and it was $8.50 an hour, but had health benefits.
Somebody's going, praise the Lord.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now
$8.50 is good.
Right, because they know that they can get their kids, have their health needs taken care of. They also know that they aren't going to be able to feed them
As easily.
and clothe them on that
But
wage.
these are the kinds of decisions that are having to be made.
That is very true.
And so there are people that are kind of on that edge, on that cusp, and they are able, fortunately, to make use of the many pantries around and other
Yes.
social service agencies that pull food from the food bank network.
That's correct. Now, in food bank, if that's a general area that the food banks work in. But food, you can't stay the same. You have to move with society.
And change with the needs.
Right, and food banks have, and I hope that we have here at Omaha too. We've gone into a couple new programs that I'm
Which you're
just
pretty excited
absolutely
about.
delighted with. First of those is our kids' cafes. We have 5 of them in Omaha, and we operate those in partnership with one of our existing member agencies. And we do that because we know about food, they know about programming, mentoring,
So what
help
agency
with homework.
is this?
We partner with the Hope Center on 2200 North 20th with a Kids Cafe, the Salvation Army at 24th and Pratt with a Kids Cafe, Campfire Boys and Girls down at the Guadalupe Center in South Omaha, Family Service out on North 30th at the Ruth K. Solomon, and we just, in the last week and a half, opened our 5th Kids Cafe in partnership with the YMCA, the Southside YMCA down at 30th.
30th Q. Yeah. All right. So what's a kids cafe? It's a neat name.
The thing we feed them an evening meal to kids, hopefully, that are at risk of going hungry. We know they can get breakfast and lunch at school with free of charge if they need it. So we know they're getting breakfast, but many of those kids get the free breakfast and free lunch.
And that's
They don't
it.
get anything until breakfast the next morning, and that is not conducive to good learning. But we don't. So we provide the grant money to provide the evening meal for them, but we want it to be in the context of not a kid's soup kitchen. We want lots of program. We want to give them a safe haven. We want to get them off the streets after school.
So it's really kind of a psychological thing because, you know that if you gave out dinner, the kids would show up somewhere.
Yes.
But this way, they're in a good programmed structure
Sure.
where
Help
they're
with the
getting good
homework.
positive things, help, and then that meal, which also is necessary for them. So the idea is that kids aren't running around looking for a free meal. They're already working
part of a
within
total
real
program.
positive structure.
Now, and
What do you mean you give them grants? I mean, how does this all work?
well, we provide hopefully most of the food, and we provide them money which we go out and
Raise?
raise to help. You've got to have somebody to cook the meal, the evening meal, and help them with those costs.
Defray expenses.
Yeah. But I got to tell you, for about $1 a day, we can feed a child. The whole cost of cooking it and everything.
So how many kids are you feeding?
We're
Is this-
about 500.
Wow. That's what, weeknights?
Weeknights. Each kid's cafe is a
Little
little
different,
bit different.
depending on their program situation.
One of them is Tuesday through Friday and lunch on Saturday because they aren't in school, because they aren't
Just to
open
make
on
sure they
Monday.
get some meal on the week.
Guadalupe Center, during the school year, it's Monday through Friday. During the summer,
Lunch.
it's lunch.
Yeah.
And so they're all a little bit different.
Now you go to the other end of the age spectrum too in your new programs.
We've started about 4 years ago, actually, we started our food bank outreach program where we deliver food directly to our low-income seniors, and mainly through the housing, the high-rise housing for elderly,
The Housing
low-income
Authority,
elderly. So many of those people, and the bulk of the food, although we do a lot of other kinds of foods, but the bulk of the food that we deliver to them is produce, fresh produce, and bakery. They cannot, if they're living on Social Security, there is no way they can go to the store and buy fresh produce. I'm sure that's
I've
not the
figured
cheapest.
out how. Yeah,
it's not
that's
the cheapest thing in the
Yeah,
world.
fresh produce is probably. That's why it's so difficult sometimes for people on limited means to diet properly.
That's right, because they can't
That's the-
afford that.
that's a
Yeah.
little-
And
the most expensive
Same
stuff.
way with the bread. You think about bread, but that can count up very fast. And
Well, and it's also the fact that they often can't get it out as much. They don't have
That's
the
right.
transportation, although many of the high rises are on bus lines.
Yes.
But some of them aren't as agile
no, that's right.
as they used to be.
Right.
So, I mean, the fact that sort of can come to them a little bit is come to their
they
high rise.
probably, and I guess we touch both spectrums in the middle. The two groups I worry the most about, Carol, are the kids and the low-income seniors, because neither one of those groups can. If you and I are hungry, we can do something about it if we really want to.
It's just
those-
we have more options.
Yes, those two groups, they don't have any options.
Okay, let me be a Scrooge here for a second. It's not in my nature, but I can do it good. Wait a minute. Those kids are getting free breakfast, free lunch, now free dinner. Where are their parents?
The parents are working in some cases, but so many of them are, from single. We've got so many single-parent families.
Yeah,
today.
and we can cry all we want about
Yeah. And-
sociologically how
Okay,
sad that
Carol,
is, but it's true.
And I will tell you that there are some children being fed at the kids' cafe that they wouldn't go without a meal if they didn't get it there. The parents would have something at home. But in almost 90% of those cases, what it does is it gives the parent, if they, some option that they don't have to get behind on their gas bill, their rent, because they just don't have enough to go around.
And because they're in a program, they have more flexibility in their working hours.
That's
because we
right.
don't want kids by themselves.
No, and most of these kids would go home to an empty house. And it's not because the parents don't care.
No, it's
in
because
most
those are the hours
cases.
they might have to work.
Yes. And, you know, and I can relate back to that. I remember when a little kid that my mother was a sole support, and she had to work from midnight to
But it
7
was
because
a
that's the
different
only
world.
time she could get a job. No.
And she wanted to
yeah,
be home with you at night, but
Yeah.
still, it was a different world.
That's right. But what, I guess what I'm saying is especially the single parent families,
have a real empathy.
they don't necessarily have, they don't have much choice to say, no, I want to work these particular hours because my kids are going to.
We'd all want to work the same
Yeah,
hours.
yeah.
Nobody would be working those
Well,
off hours.
that's right. But they can't get a job then.
How many people do you think something like I mean, this is going on all over the country, 200 some food banks and
Yeah.
that are part of networks. How many people do you think the Nebraska Food Bank, and you can add in Lincoln, I'm sure, or not, depending on how you work your statistics in the state, how many people do you touch with food every year?
Well, the easier thing for me to equate it to is, for instance, we distributed 6 million pounds of food in 2002 to
6
our
million
agencies
pounds of
and
food.
to our subsidiaries, which then they distribute to agencies. I always like to be very conservative and say 3/4 of a pound of food per meal. Now, you may say, oh, Don, that's not very much. Just weigh out the food you eat. 3/4 of a pound of food is a lot of food. So that's, close to 8 million, on that basis, 8 million meals.
Even
for
if you
people.
were
that,
less conservative and said a pound a meal.
yes,
Which
it'd still
is
be-
not, when you
it'd
figure
be
breakfast,
six-
it wouldn't be
it'd
that much.
6 million
But it'd be
meals
6 million. That's a lot
over
of
the
meals.
state, over
In
the
a
whole
state
state of
this
the
sized.
Right.
And these are all people that have demonstrated a need, and that's kind of a humbling experience in itself. They
Yes.
have to go demonstrate this
Right.
need, but they have demonstrated the need. In other words, they have shown in some fashion or to some agency that they definitely fall in an
Absolutely.
income level where
Yes.
they need the help.
That they need the help.
And that's a humbling experience too for many people that have never. I mean, they've got money, a little money coming in, but the one thing they need is food.
That's right.
I know a
And,
lot of people like that.
And the kids won't deny that they're hungry. Some of our seniors, low-income seniors, the pride fact does inhibit them from sometimes saying, I need help.
Well, and they
They'll
come
go
from a
hungry.
different era.
Right, they'll
they
go
come
hungry.
from an era where you just
Right.
didn't, unless someone was going down the street and passing it out to everybody, as it was in the Depression, in a
Right,
sense.
yep.
They wouldn't.
No, but some of them will go hungry rather than admit that they don't have anything.
They're very
And-
proud.
Oh, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that. But people like myself working in that field need to recognize that. And you can work around that. For instance, our outreach program. We don't particularly say, hey, this is free food because you need it. Because a lot of them wouldn't take it then.
So how do you psychologically present that program?
It's the food bank outreach. We have excess food. We'll bring it out here for you if you want it.
And you
And-
come out
and-
with a smile on your
Right.
face and
see, in what happens in most of the high rises for low-income elderly, the food, we work with the managers, the food is put out on tables in their community room.
plus they
And-
almost all need it. So it's
That's
like
right.
it's a community
And
thing.
then
Let's
they
go down
come-
and get the food.
But then they aren't having to ask the food bank for it. It's brought in there and put out, hey, there's food down, we've got this kind of produce and this kind of bakery.
Why don't you
if
come down and take a
anybody
look?
wants it, yes.
Yeah, come down and see what they got.
So then they aren't being looked at as needy people have
Right.
it getting a handout.
And that's just part of their ethic from, I mean, none of us likes to say that.
No,
But
that's right.
there's a certain ethic that came, 70, 80 years ago that they
Absolutely.
grew up in.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. With the increasing drought and the problems in western Nebraska, what is often seen as an urban problem, just because of the logistics of an urban situation, there always seems to be a chunk of poor people trying to move up.
Right.
Our rural areas, you're probably going to be getting more requests.
Especially the Panhandle is the poverty level is so great, and one of the reasons, the Scotts Bluff area, the Platte Valley, in there, it's a lot of beets, beans, and so forth. Lots of migrant farm workers that go work there.
That we count on to get the crop in.
Yeah, it's like 5 or 6 months a year that they work, though. And then they have no work. And so that poverty level has just been growing. And of course, especially in the western part of the state, the drought has been so bad that there just hasn't been a crop for the last 3-4 years.
And those that may have never expected to be in a position.
Right. And what happens if there's no crop? The farmers are not buying new equipment, not buying new cars, they're not buying new clothes.
They're making do, as they say.
Yes. Okay, but the small towns then, if the farmer doesn't have any money to spend, the businesses start, they go down. They have to start laying people off. And that's what you've seen in the last 3-4 years, especially in the far western part of the state.
And it's going to be a while till that recovers. And then just because people are moving away from the rural areas, when you lose jobs, it's kind of a never-ending cycle.
That's right.
Even just keeping the people there to keep things going. When the younger people are moving out, and the average age is skewing very high.
The other thing you see is that the small towns are getting smaller, and the average age just keeps going up because the young people are
They're
moving
outta
away.
here.
Well, but then the grocery stores start closing,
Right.
so they have to go further.
Yeah, that kind of shakeout that we saw during the 80s with the farm crisis and everything, we thought that was kind of the end of it.
Yep.
But where that shakeout sort of continues to
Yes,
go
it
on
does.
and has gotten
It
worse.
does.
Now you must go, every profession, every industry, and you're kind of an industry in terms of, you're a sector of
Yes.
filling a need, has national conventions and networking amongst themselves. What are they seeing 5-10 years down the road for the need for food and the kinds of programs?
Well, and it's a matter of getting some different programs, probably. But you know what, Carol? There is more food wasted in this country than the need could ever be.
Okay,
We're
let's talk
wasting-
about that.
And
And it's not because people,
what it just happens that way.
restaurants, we just don't have the food bank was the first real mechanism.
Yes.
The system, it's a systems problem.
But my wife and I are probably a good example of that. We eat. We never eat everything.
But we
It
can't
gets
go
thrown
around
out.
door to door and
No, but it gets thrown out.
Right.
But for most of us, it's been a land of plenty. And so, if we need this much, let's make that much in case we're a little hungry at time. Instead of,
But we're not going to personally change I
we
think
won't,
maybe if
no.
times get a little tight, you might buy smaller portions.
right.
And then you won't have much left over. But as the food industry,
Yes.
they've made great efforts to hand over where there have been
absolutely.
places like
Right.
the food bank.
And,
So what's the next stage?
I'm not a great one for having not-for-profits become lobbying
Right.
forces.
No, and I understand that.
But one area that we have lobbied very hard on in Washington, and I think we're making some pretty good progress, is to provide the manufacturers and processors of food with a reasonable tax deduction that would make it much easier for them not only to give us their excess food, but to do some separate runs for food banks. Now, in the past, that was not.
Some of it's
because
still
they-
going to the landfill because it's cheaper to
No,
cart.
no, it's not going to the landfill.
Good.
What
Oh,
I'm
good.
saying is, sure, if they've got excess, they get a tax deduction, but it's not a great tax deduction. We've gotten it changed once, but we want to get it changed again so they can recover their full cost.
Right,
If they
just
can
like if
recover
I
their-
did
right,
give
if they
something
can
away or money
recover their
away.
full cost, they will consider doing first line runs to supply food banks.
If they've got it and they want to get
Because
it moved.
it doesn't cost them a lot of money then. They're going to get a deduction.
You just want a fair deduction.
Yeah, we want a fair deduction for them.
Now, do grocery stores or any of these places who often support food drives, do they oppose any of this, or is everybody pretty much?
Oh, you mean
in the
as far as giving the
deduction?
No, I don't think so.
There's
no.
pretty much a singleness of purpose in this sort of thing.
Right. Now, and one thing in the past that was very difficult for some companies, national companies would not give simply because of liability. Most states
Have changed. We changed
yes,
that
Good
here.
Samaritan laws.
If there's
But if they operated across 5 states, for example, be 5 different laws. Now, I'm saying it's going to be about 6 years ago, they did pass the federal Good Samaritan law, which
took care of that
preempts
problem.
the states.
Right.
But that for the national companies like a Kellogg, for example, they're all over the country.
Which is a real community-minded organization.
Yes, but they know exactly the Good Samaritan law covers them in Nebraska the same way it does in
Yeah, as
Michigan
long as they have
or
no
anyplace
intent to
else.
do harm and they've done everything by the book, they're cool.
Right.
Well, listen, we just want to mention that if you want to find out more about the Nebraska Food Bank Network, it's easy to find, omahafoodbank.org.
Yes.
And if you had one wish, we just have a teeny bitty bit of time, 2 ounces of time,
If I had one wish.
what would it be?
Lots of protein product. That's the one thing.
The brain food.
Brain food and monetary. Since 9/11, we, like all not-for-profits, monetary contributions have decreased.
And you can get all this food, but there's still the cost of keeping it cold and frozen and whatnot
That's
and whatnot
correct,
and whatnot.
yes.
And they always take volunteers.
Yes,
all kinds
we
of
do.
things that need to be done. Don Schinzel, I want to thank you. We've
Thank
got a
you.
lot of things on our mind in this country right now, but I think we should always think of what we need here at home.
Thank you very much.
Take care. That's the Nebraska Food Bank Network. And if you want to see this show or pass this show along to someone else on your computer, it's unotv.unomaha.edu. Eat well. Don't throw away. We'll see you back here next week.